Okay, people, we're live. So how about everybody starts introducing themselves? We'll go in alphabetical order for your first name. So Bill, you start.
Technically, I'm a William.
Okay,
right.
William.
What do you want to know? I mean, my name's Bill Best. I have been role-playing for probably, how long has it been? It's probably been about 5 or 6 years now. Started with D&D, met Eric, introduced me to just about every other system. I am a big fan of the Cypher system and Numenera.
Good start.
Duane.
My turn. I am Duane Woods. I have been role-playing for, I believe it's 31 years now. Started in February 1989. I can remember it exactly. Yeah, it's been a while. I've played I don't know how many games, probably in the 20 to 30 range. I haven't quite counted them all out yet. But yeah, it's been quite a fun journey, meeting different people throughout the times, and starting off in Manitoba and then moving to BC and then continuing on with a different group and still maintaining connections with the previous group. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Cool. So I'm Eric Brooke. I've been role-playing since, I guess it's probably about 30 years as well. I started in the UK. It was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, so like 2nd edition. And I think the next game I played was Ars Magica. I moved to Canada, and then I found some good people like Duane and others to play with. And then eventually Stephanie and others that you'll get to meet. I have over 200 role-playing games, and I've probably now run about 50 of them. So yeah, that's me. Mark.
Yep, I'm Mark Levy. I've been playing role-playing games for about, I think, 3 to 4 years. My first was D&D 5e. I've only played a handful of other ones, maybe 3 or 4 total. And I've GM'd or DM'd for 2 circles. And yeah, not a lot of experience, but had a lot of fun. I like the concept and the fun that's had when you're someone else and somewhere else. Yeah.
Awesome. And then I'm Stephanie Phillips. I started playing, I think, midway through 2014. Eric got me into role playing, and we played with Duane out in Vancouver as well, and then in Chicago with Mark and Bill. I started with Eclipse phase, which was quite a way to be thrown into role-playing, where your character couldn't die. Well, you would die a lot, but you download into a new body. And we jumped through space. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, intense way to get started, but I've been able to try a whole bunch of other games since then that have been pretty awesome. My favorite is still 7th Sea, I would say.
I think when you make a statement, our rule should be you say why. So you said 7th Sea, so tell us why.
Sure. For me, 7th Sea is the most fun because you always succeed. So for people who have not played 7th Sea before, when you approach a situation, you use your character sheet to figure out how many dice you roll, and you pair them up into the number of actions that you can take. And then you just take that many actions and explain what you do with each action. And so I find that it feels more like the GM and the players are building a story together rather than sort of playing against each other, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So in the chat, you can see the link. Feel free to share it to whoever you want to, so that we can get it maybe up to 2 watchers. Also, if you have questions that while you're thinking or listening to someone else, feel free to share them either in the YouTube chat or in the Zoom chat. I nearly forgot what Zoom was there for a second. Okay. Let's talk about why we got into role playing, what it was like, and everything else. Mark, do you want to start this time? You're on mute.
Sure. So I guess my first experience with it wasn't really playing it. It was more me going through one of my friend's older brother's old stuff when he was stealing his room because he moved out. It was an advanced D&D, like first or second edition book that had like a few character sheets in there. And I was just kind of like, what's this? How does this work? And it seemed interesting that a whole story could be made from this, and kind of, I never got to play with those people, but fast forward to about 4 years ago, one of my friends asked me to play, and I was kind of just open to it, mainly because I've had played other like RPG games, like video games, and I liked the lore and the stories behind a lot of those things. So I thought, building your own and having your own character with an open-ended world sounded pretty cool. And yeah, so that kind of just evolved into me liking the group fun aspect of it, and the sandbox aspect of it, because a lot of times you can never like, well, pretty much every time you can never fully understand or predict what's going to happen in any session that you play, even if it's as simple as getting out of the Lost Woods.
Cool. Thank you, Mark. How about you, Duane?
So do you want to restate that again, Eric, the question?
Yeah, why did you start role playing, and what did you really enjoy about it?
I mean, I'm thinking back 31 years here, but from what I remember, there was a group of us. I think I was in grade 9 at the time. So now I'm automatically dating myself. I didn't have many friends at that point. I had moved to a small town, and I was there for I think that would have been my 3rd year there, and just had a couple of friends. And then one of them suggested we should try D&D sometime, and they knew a couple of other people who I wasn't hanging around with. So we did that, and we tried it. And like you, Eric, I think my first game was AD&D. I can't remember which edition, but I do remember it being AD&D. And then there was a game called Top Secret that was also very soon after that. And those were kind of the first 2 games that I played in that year. And other games were soon to follow, but that year mostly was, especially that summer, you get into the summer vacation when you're in high school or junior high, and we had tons of time to spend. So it was nothing to have, a sudden 12-hour game would happen right out of the blue, and that would happen almost every weekend back then. So it was a good way to get into it and quickly gather a group of friends back then. So that was basically the start of it, and that was why it happened. And then, all these years later, I'm still friends with those very same people that I played games with, and then met other people along the way. So gaming is good that way, is that I find that you tend to retain a lot of the friends that you meet along the way and you play with. So for me, it's a great hobby and a great way to stay in contact with friends too. And we still reference some of the games that we played decades ago. We'll remember certain things, usually things that went wrong, and we just bring them up as if we're, reminiscing about a movie that we watched, because that memory is retained in the same way. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It's cool, Duane. I do remember actually talking to Carl, and he goes, "Do you remember that time you tried to get us to find a Cooper?" And I go,
"Yes, we still bring that up all the time. We always make the joke about finding a Cooper, and it's those kinds of things that you will always remember. It's those goofy things." Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Bill, tell us about your first time.
That's a different conversation. Yeah, so how I got started so it was D&D 5e. Basically what had happened was I had grown up playing a lot of board games, a lot of the standards, the Monopolies and Parcheesies and things, a lot of card games, but never, I don't know if the gaming community was not as big back then, thinking to like the sheer number of board games that exist today. But I definitely never got into role-playing games. Instead, it was a lot of video games. But it was always kind of a social experience for me. I never really liked playing video games by myself. I wanted to sit around a couch and watch my friends play and switch on and off. So um, I was watching Twitch and stumbled across the Critical Role folks doing their D&D streams. And I thought, you know what, I'll just watch. I'll just see what it's like. I hear all this buzz about what Dungeons and Dragons is and how nerdy it is and how, goofy it is. And so I started watching and I got really hooked on the story and I got really hooked on the improv. And so I reached out to a buddy of mine and said, hey, would you be interested in doing, throwing something together? He and I worked together. And he's like, well, I used to play. So yeah, let's get a group of people together and start something. We had a handful of different DMs. We had kind of hired a friend of somebody's to come do it for us for a little while. And then one of the other guys kind of tried his hand at it. But after a while, that kind of spun off. I switched jobs. I met Eric, and it's kind of a no looking back from there.
Steph, do you want to go next?
Sure. I was trying to remember back before I met you, Eric, whether role-playing was even on my radar. Like whether that was something that I was aware of. I'm sure I had heard Dungeons and Dragons, the words in passing before, but I don't know that I knew what it was. And I remember being super nervous because I was getting into playing at the same time as like meeting all of your friends too. And there was a lot of improv in a new game that I didn't really know. And so I definitely was, I think, like silent basically for the first 2 games that we played. I remember loving the idea of getting into my character, and so I was having long character conversations in my head, but not quite ready to like say them out loud yet. But as I got more comfortable with the game and with the group, I definitely enjoyed the puzzle solving aspect of it. Just like Bill, I also grew up playing a lot of board games and card games, and I enjoyed the more complicated, sort of less chance-based ones. And in some ways, that's what role-playing is. Like the puzzles are maybe more complicated. There's that teamwork aspect, and then there's still the chance that rolling will go horribly wrong or horribly well. So that's how I got into it. I think we played Dungeons and Dragons after going through Eclipse phase. And I think I then discovered that I'm much more of a fantasy role player than I am science fiction. So I really enjoyed, and I think I found more of my stride with Dungeons and Dragons, and then we got to try lots more, both fantasy and science fiction.
Cool. So I'll answer the question, and then let's ask each other questions or things that you're curious about. It was definitely Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, as I mentioned, but they were all very tactical games. So you try and break into a dungeon, try and get the treasure and everything else. But the first thing that really blew me away was a red box Dungeons and Dragons game. I was playing a mage. I had 2 hit points, and I think I had started with 1 spell, if I remember rightly, which was sleep, and then you basically hide. And the dungeon master was an amazing storyteller. So the mechanics just seemed to disappear. It was like, we're in a world. I knew a lot of the other characters in the world, non-playing characters, NPCs, and I had relationships with them. And I remember we would also occasionally play with the dungeon master, just with the dungeon master, because we would have little arcs that we'd go and do things. And I think that storytelling, I think, what would I say, 14, 15, was just astounding. It was like a great experience. And that, I think, lasted about a year. So I think it was a campaign as opposed to just Dungeons and Dragons, because I used to do lots of wargaming, but was quite good And I discovered early on that if you do wargaming and you're quite good, you don't have many friends because people want to beat you. So I think the next game I jumped into was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. We played the Shadows of Abolgahav and Death in the Reich. It was a great game run by a friend called Shane. I think that's where I started to love playing Elf Rangers, is probably where I started. But science fiction came a little bit later. And I think the first game that I really enjoyed was Mega Traveler. And then later on Eclipse Phase. And I liked Eclipse Phase because it just blew everything away. Like the concept of dying and the fact that you would lose memories and things. So that was great. So why? Very much what Duane said. It was about putting friends together. It was about living in a different place, being different people, being able to explore what that means. And I remember to this day, there was a Dungeons and Dragons thing where we were just about to be overrun by orcs and goblins. And it was the first time that I would say that Eric took lead in anything. And without a doubt, it developed my leadership skills, my confidence to lead. And I think that's affected for me for my whole life. Cool. Which of you would like to ask a question, and to whom?
So I had a question for Steph based off of something that Duane said. You mentioned that the reason you like 7th Sea is because you can rarely fail and you're building that story. But Duane mentioned that like some of the most memorable stories are the ones that you're failing. How does that game system, because I've only had the opportunity to play it once with you, and I really enjoyed the story. How does that game system lend itself to, I guess, memorable stories, not just kind of general storytelling?
That's a really great question. And it gives me the opportunity to share another thing that I think is a reason why I enjoy it so much, which is that the point of the game is to be ridiculous. So it's based in sort of a world like Princess Bride, The Road to El Dorado, Pirates of the Caribbean, where characters just get to do ridiculous things. I got momentarily distracted by our cat spectator as well. Hello, cat spectator. Yeah, where things can just be like really over the top and ridiculous. And so the game rewards players for taking risks, being creative. I think the example that's always used is rather than like, I run forward and sword fight them. It's like I jump up, grab the chandelier, cut the rope, swing around the room, and then like land sword facing down, like head hit kind of deal. So that's one way that sort of very creative and ridiculous actions are rewarded, and creativity. I think also the aspect of the game around hero points. So players will often get awarded hero points in the game, and they can spend it to do the sort of classic things like re-roll dice that don't go well, give your friend more dice to roll. Something that's not in the instructions, but that I saw in one of the videos that the creator made, was you can also use hero points to change aspects of the game in the moment. So like I spend a hero point, and well, with our recent game, the important magical stone that everybody was trying to get their hands on, the villain was stuck in the ocean, and he threw it up to his first mate on the ship. And I can't remember.
I think it was Eric.
Was it Eric who threw down the hero point and said, well, first he said a seagull grabs the stone out of the air. And I was like, well, I did describe before that the stone was like 2 palms wide, like it's pretty big. And he was like, okay, it's a pelican. A pelican swoops out of the air and swallows the stone. And that's my favorite moment from the whole night that we played. And then another one of our friends was able to spend his turn throwing his newly acquired pirate monkey at the pelican and grabbing it out of the air and reeling it back onto the ship. And that I will absolutely be telling that story for years. So I think the hero points are what really makes memorable when players are able to just change the environment, change the story, and that makes it even more ridiculous.
Makes sense. Thanks.
So thanks for asking the question. I'd be curious to know from everybody, maybe this isn't a specific person question, but especially from more experienced game masters, either what you've done or what you've seen other game masters make a story more memorable as well.
I think like our current group currently has 3 GMs, and we rotate through. And then there was Eric when you guys were out in BC, and then in Manitoba we had, I think, probably another 3 or 4 game masters. So I've seen quite a few do it, and to me, what I like seeing is just their individual take on it. Everyone has a different way of running something, and I like it when people add in their own little innovations, or sometimes there's some homebrew rules, or they have a particular flair for characters. There's just I just like it when they pick up on something, and you can tell that there's personality injected into it. That's why I never get upset about one GM running something a certain way. I might say something or think something like, "Oh, that might not be the way that I run it," but this is their game. This is their personality coming through, and since we're rotating around, I'll get to see how other people run different games, including myself. And there might be things that I do that someone may not like. But I think it's allowing that creativity and choice to come forth that I think really helps a lot, and it really brings a game alive in its own way, kind of thing. Nothing becomes generic at that point. It's all got something else injected into it. So there's just various things that people can do. I've seen people, play music in the background. Our friend Paul is really great with these great characters in D&D. They always have voices, and they always have a funny background, and he just makes them come across as being more alive, and it makes it more fun. I've been with other GMs who focus more on the mechanical part of things, and then the rest of us sort of pick up on the story as that goes. So there's just various ways of doing it, and I just like seeing how different GMs do that. Even if I don't like everything they do, I just like that, they're the ones that are taking the time to go out and they're preparing the game, and they're reading the rules, and they're putting together a story, and they're hoping that you like it and enjoy it. So that's the main thing, is that you do enjoy it and that everyone enjoys it. But just seeing their particular take on running a game is what I like about it. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm going to take it from the player side. Often when I run a game, you get people who do the same thing or do something unusual. So we have a friend called Kyle, hopefully he'll join us at some point, when we're playing Eclipse phase, of where he would eat something on every planet he went to. These are all exoplanets, so they're all not in the solar system, but it was like his thing, is that he always wanted to eat something. And I never really thought much of it. I thought, oh, this is a Kyle thing. And then I met Mo, who we used to role play with, and he actually was playing a dwarf, and he would always eat something. And it was kind of like, huh. So I think actually, whilst you may have a story in your head, often the players actually change that story. Now,
yeah.
I really love that. Yeah. And then sometimes I remember playing a game where the players were getting very paranoid. It was an Eclipse phase game in Chicago. And I thought, wow, this plot's so much better than my plot. I'm going to use this. So I just changed my entire story and just kind of revealed little elements so that they started to, wow, we were right. Yeah, you were. Because the reality is suddenly changed because of what you did.
That reminds me, like I found the same thing. And I actually like it when characters change the story because it gives them agency. It feels like they're actually affecting it. And when you can show that, I think it contributes a lot more. And there's the sort of the shared storytelling, even though it's sort of inferred. It's not directly, I'm not directly asking them, where should we take this story? It's, I present them a situation, they take it in one way, but they go in a different way than I expected, or they roll and something unexpected happens that's pretty crazy that does it. I was running a Star Wars game a couple of years ago, and it was on Tatooine, and they had this ship, and there was a sandcrawler with one of the main bad guys in it. It was a Hutt, and then Carl said, we're just going to strafe it. So all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, they just fire a bunch of missiles at it, and they've got some amazing rolls that completely destroyed it, and it just completely changed the whole storyline of where it went. And it actually made it a bit darker because you actually had your heroes contributing to this. There was others on that sandcrawler. They didn't know who was there, so it actually made it a lot darker, and it just took a turn when that happened. But it made for a much more interesting story, and they felt like they had agency in doing that, in changing that. And I think they were pretty happy with it. And I don't even think they knew the exact extent of how much the story changed until after it was all completed. And I actually told them that was a huge turning point. And I actually had to go home after that and think about it, because I had something in my head kind of loosely. I do try and have things so that they're changeable, but I had to completely change the whole direction of the story of where it went. But in the end, I thought it made it much more memorable, and I hopefully I thought it was more fun for all the players involved too. So, yeah.
Mark or Bill, what are things that you like that you've seen in games that you've either run or you've seen other people do?
Things that specifically on the topic of things that make them memorable. Yeah, I definitely think that of the games that I've played, the times where things happen unexpectedly, I roll poorly, and it changes dramatically, or if I roll very well and it changes dramatically. Those are the cases that I remember most. I also think discovering, for me, it's the world that I remember. It's the people within it. It's the environments. I really enjoy playing because I start to see it build up as session over session. Each session is like a little glimpse into the broader world that the DM may or may not, or the GM may or may not have entirely in their head. And so that to me is the exciting part.
So could you give us a specific?
Yeah. Well, we were playing Ars Magica, Magica with Eric. We went into, what's it? It's a Fey realm, right? And I don't quite remember the interactions leading up to this. And Steph, keep me honest here. I recall we were kind of heading through what I want to say is kind of like a fairy, or like a countryside. There was a squirrel, if I remember correctly, that would not leave us alone.
Yes.
He kept asking us for nuts, I believe.
I'd actually forgotten about the squirrel, but I remember now. Yes.
Then at a later time, and this is what I don't remember, is what occurred. Mo was on top of a barrel.
Yes.
And then the barrel became sentient. And
the barrel was not impressed that
not
Mo
impressed
was
at all.
hugging him desperately. Yeah, I think we were trying to cross a lake or get something out of the lake. I remember that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Mo was trying to cross the lake on the barrel, I believe. And then I think he tried to do something and it shot him across or something, and they, if I'm remembering correctly, they hit a rock and then the thing popped up and was like, that wasn't cool. uh, but like that world, I can still envision the kind of the plains we were walking through. We got to a bridge that was, as you walked across, the flowers were popping up, and that imagery is sticking in my mind. I don't always remember the conversations that are had that lead up to it, but the actual kind of visuals of it stick with me.
I remember too, the element for me maybe of the Feywild that I remember the most is that all of the colors are more vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that descriptor and could very well imagine like the green being more vibrant and the blue and the sky, and yeah, cool. What about you, Mark?
I'm trying to think. I haven't had as much experience as everyone here, but to me, what sticks out for one reason or another is like kind of when the party finds itself in a difficult situation where there doesn't seem like many avenues out, and that's often associated with a character dying. Like that's when kind of your back's against the wall and you need to use whatever you've collected throughout your journey to find some way out or find some really smart way in order to bypass a danger. Like for example, most recently, I was playing a game that was actually my very first game that I was playing. We're still doing it. We're around the end of the campaign. And we're in some underworld realm, being sieged, and we're attacked by some giant demon creature. And it basically stomped us, and we didn't stand a huge chance, but we were kind of whittling away at it. And and so it takes one of my friends and flies away, kind of just the GM's way of kind of ending the encounter. Maybe something else will happen. I didn't really want to leave it, so I cast Power Word Stun on it. If anyone's familiar with that, it kind of stops the monster in its tracks. It ended up falling, dying, but also flattening my friend as well under the beast. We're pretty late into the game though, so we have some resurrection tools. But I kind of never stopped hearing about the fact that I killed our friend. And I don't know, it's just kind of those situations where you kind of don't want to let go of that situation, or you don't want to kind of chalk this up to a loss. So you find a way. Like another time we were on a bridge and there was a fire giant that was kind of forcing us back, and there were wolves or hellhounds on the other side. And I ended up turning the giant into a turtle and tossing him off of the bridge. And I don't know, just those kind of like back against the wall. We have no real way out unless we find some quick way through this. We could not take that giant down had we fought it traditionally. So those sort of moments stick in your head. Yeah.
But I'm sure there was a lot of risk associated with the rolls. You got the right dice rolls at the right times to make that possible. Had you rolled poorly on turning him into a turtle? Very different story.
Mm-hmm. And then that's also memorable too. We were trying to escape a cave once, and one of my friends died on the way out by one of the big bad evil guys. And it's kind of like we always think of that area as his grave, right? Or because you build such an attachment to these characters, and one of them loses their life in the party and never seen again. And it's sad, even though the actual player is still there, right?
Cool.
I still remember the time that Duane's character got ripped in half by a giant octopus squid thing.
It was
Hydra.
the Hydra.
A
Yeah.
Hydra.
Yeah. All 5 heads attacked me at the same time. It tore me apart.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing was, I think, Stephanie, you and Kyle were fairly new to gaming at that point when that happened. And I remember us looking over at your faces, and you were both completely stunned that had happened. That may have been the first death that you had witnessed in an RPG.
Well, and I
And
think
it was-
that was... Sorry, finish yours, I thought.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a pretty catastrophic death. Was that not the first one? Maybe there was another one.
No, it definitely was. No, what I was going to
Okay.
say was it was interesting getting started with Eclipse phase a game where like the stakes are high in one sense, because if you do things wrong or fail, big bad syndicates can win, or the I can't remember the name of the big scary technology people can come back, but you can't die. I remember we did die, and I don't know if this was in the first game or a later one, but you download into a new brain, and this is a fun thing to play because you have to play as if your character does not remember the last few hours or the last few days, even though you of course just played them, but then you all died, so you've re-uploaded without those memories, and you're trying to solve the same puzzle with mostly not information, except you're like, oh, that might be my charred body, so I guess something went wrong over here. Shouldn't do that again. So to go from that, and then I went I think straight from that to D&D, where you got torn apart. So that was not only the first time I saw a character death, but it was the first time where I really realized that it could happen. So I wish I could have seen my face too. I'm sure it was great.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, and that's one of the things that I'll remember for quite some time, was the look on your face and Kyle's face.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, you probably remember that as well.
Yeah, I do. It was like, oh, this is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because I don't think
I thought
it
was
actually
funny.
Yeah, I don't think it actually had. I feel like we killed it like the round after.
I think so too. It was just Paul just rolled just so amazingly that I couldn't do anything about it. It just took me out.
I mean,
But,
I
yeah,
remember that it was twice your hit points, or your total hit points, which is why he decided it was character
ridiculous.
death. And he was even apologizing about it, I remember. Maybe because he saw Kyle's and my faces. But...
That's right. Yeah. I thought it was funny. And it was my character.
So if it's possible to transition, I think I want to segue from that into, as GMs, how do you feel about killing off player characters, or even the whole party? As a new GM, one of the things that's difficult for me is, well, one is like I'm just trying to get the session to stay in order, let alone like, can this thing be powerful enough to take out the party? And so oftentimes I might kind of wiggle it just to keep everybody going, because it's still early and we haven't started a campaign yet. It's just in independent sessions or whatever.
I always say that I don't have a problem with character death, and I usually try and say at the beginning that death happens in role-playing games, at least most of them. I know that a lot of the rules, though, once you start playing them, are actually slanted way towards the players. So that mechanical advantage plays into it. The past two games that I ran, so Star Wars and Call of Cthulhu, they were quite slanted towards the players in terms of death. You could get injured quite easily, but death was really tough to actually achieve, just because of how those rules were built. In Star Wars, I had the players were perpetually injured. Like I think the entire campaign, I think they were injured in some way, shape, or form. And Call of Cthulhu was very similar. And we had one player character. He probably should have died about 3 times in that campaign, but the rules actually prevented him from dying. We did have one character die. That was Carl's character. And again, that was just catastrophic rolling on his part, and miraculous rolling on my part. So in that sense, it took an awful lot to actually kill a character. Not all games are going to be built that way. Some games are a bit more deadly, and some games maybe you're balancing out certain things. But I was finding that I think more games are geared a little bit more towards the players in not dying in that sense. But the other thing that I tell people is that actions have consequences. You can do whatever you want. If you're going to be like, well, I'm going to go up to this guy and stab him. I'll be like, okay, well, just reminder here of who this person is. Maybe he was someone powerful and he's got minions around him or something like that, or someone else hears about it and they come after them. So I build that into the storyline. maybe the players can fend it off. Maybe they can defend it. Maybe they find another way around it. Or like in Star Wars, it just became a much darker story as a result of their actions. But I do say, like, I try and make it logical. So if they do something that is, say, on the wrong side, then they might have a reaction that comes back at them in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, in terms of the death, I will just say that yeah, a lot of the games now are mechanically protective of more of the players in that sense.
I think it also, some games really do err into combat being lethal. So Ars Magica, because it has open rolls or a stress roll in this particular case, where you roll a die, and if you get a 1, you re-roll the die, and then you re-roll and you re-roll and you re-roll if you keep getting 1s. Twilight 2000 was like that. I think I went through quite a few deaths in that one. Rage,
which one? Version 1 or 2?
I want to say it was 1.
The original.
Yeah. I died a lot. It was a question of like how many games can I live for this? Trudvang is another one that has open rolling, so that's the Viking one. So that can be quite lethal. Or Paranoia. Paranoia was fantastic.
Well, that's built into the game.
Yeah, you're built to die. Like you have clones that are set up. Six
clones, yeah.
And I think Call of Cthulhu, I've killed a lot of people in Call of Cthulhu because, like, if you go after the big monster who happens to be a god, it really is not about rolling anymore. You're done.
Yes. I will say, yes, that did happen where yeah, we didn't even roll at that point. But just for the pure mechanical, like a firefight or a fight in Cthulhu, I found that once you got down to 0 hit points, that actually prevented you, like you couldn't go further. So you could have you could be at 0 or technically at -20 and it would act the same way because it just stops at 0. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I think why is death important? If I was to take that from what you're saying, Bill, like people need to feel that what they're doing means something, and there can be, as you said, Duane, consequences. I think, and if you meet creatures that are much more powerful than, say, your group are, there usually is going to be a consequence. I think in like the last Ars Magica game I had with Rachel, her cat died. And as a familiar, and that was quite tragic to her. So she was able to use magic with the rest of the Covenant to bring the cat back, but it missed a leg. So I would generally say that if I don't kill something, I take something important from it so that the story can carry on, but they're now different. They're now a new evolution of themselves.
There's also the aspect of retreating. You don't have to fight every single thing and think that you're going to win. That I try and offer that too. That if you come up to something that's more powerful than you, you can run away. You can pull a complete Monty Python and just run away on that, and maybe come at it in a different way or another day. But there's no shame in doing that. I know. Like D&D style, it's like you go into a dungeon, you meet something, you defeat it, you go on. But I like the idea of no, you might have to realize that this thing is more powerful than you, and you cannot defeat it, at least at that time or in that way.
You could talk to it,
or you could do that, or there's different ways of doing it. Maybe you don't even have to fight it at all. There's definitely different ways of doing it.
I definitely would say a lot of computer gamers who do role playing take a long time to learn. Oh, I can talk to it. I can negotiate with it. Or I could run away and come back with more people.
That's right. Or you don't even have to fight it at all. Maybe you don't have to.
Yeah.
You go around it.
One of the first game, the first game I ever GM'd was a Coriolis game that Steph and Eric were both a part of. And I learned the hard lesson that one, I am the GM. I don't have to be beholden to the dice rolls if I don't have to, I guess. And two, Eric will talk his way out of everything. So they managed to skirt the entire like scenario, and I was just not prepared for that. And so it was an interesting lesson to learn, but I think it was a very valuable lesson for me as a GM of like, if the intention is to balance the different parts, there are going to be some encounters where it's just not possible to talk your way out of it, and there are going to be other parts where, look, go ahead, if you want to try to convince this guy, more power to you.
Yeah.
One thing that I do to add some tension to it sometimes, I will do open rolls in front of people, and I will actually say what the consequences are before I roll. So I will say, if I roll, on the 6-sided dice, if I roll 1 to 3, this thing will happen. If I roll 4 to 6, this thing will happen. So everyone's waiting to see what the roll will be, because they already know it's going to be one of those outcomes that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So it adds to the tension in that way, but it's a fun tension I hope for. But I like doing that, and I think it adds a bit of keeping the GM honest kind of thing. Rolling in front of people. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's something to be said for rolling in private too, and then everyone is wondering what the GM is up to as well. It's just different ways of going about doing it, and I like seeing the different ways that people have in doing the roles or administering the rules of the story or anything like that.
I think creating. Go for it, Steph.
That was going to happen at some point. I think for early game masters, because I feel similarly in some ways to Bill about that, I think one of the challenges of being a new GM, especially in a new system too, like getting to know a new system while also learning how to be a GM, the challenge is balancing the monsters. And so I think I would love to get to a point where I could, like, I love that idea of using open roles to create tension. Right now, I'm still figuring out how to balance monsters and encounters. And I'm still running based on scenarios, and I know the scenarios will give you something, but the players, one of the things I've discovered is the players never follow the route the scenario tells you the players will take, ever. So, like,
it usually happens pretty quickly.
Right. And so the monster balance is going to be different from what the people who wrote the scenario expected. And so I've needed to sort of fudge rolls or play with how things are outcome, just to get a feel for how challenging or easy I want it, to have the encounter last long enough without everybody losing their limbs. And yeah, I'm thinking of RuneQuest with that one. There's a lot of lost limbs if the monster's too hard. So,
I mean, every GM in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a dice roll, whether they're just doing it in their head, whether it's how many monsters or bad guys they send at someone, they're always altering things as they go. I don't think any single person ends up running a game exactly how they wrote it down, or how a module says it, or how it's even in their head. There's always that aspect of improving it a little bit to improve the story or to keep the story going. So there, it doesn't matter what way you choose it, the GM will always make those decisions in some way. And when you're new, yeah, you're learning the rules, you're just learning how to run the group and everything like that. But it's really not any different than what any other GM does, just that they might do it a little bit more intuitively kind of thing. But it's the same idea. Everyone is altering the game in some way, shape, or form to make it a better story and to make it a better game.
I think the only games that are really good at doing monster balancing is definitely Dungeons and Dragons, whereby I will tell you a party level and they'll say these are the level of monsters you want to do. But it has years, decades, I guess, of experience built up from many, many GMs and players figuring that out.
Yeah.
I would say I have a rule that I don't always reveal, is that if I want this to be light tension, it depends on where the players are. If I need to give them some momentum, I will give them the occasionally easy win with a light injury. But if I feel that they're getting a little bit cocky, I might actually keep throwing creatures at them until they're all actually injured. And there are many ways to do that, to create, just keep plowing it on. So I might say, oh, I'll start with 4, and then say, oh, we had an easy time. Let's put another 5th one over here, shall we? So to keep adding the tension. One of my favorite things to do with tension is time. So there was an Eclipse phase game where a number of people were in an asteroid which had been directed towards Mars and was falling towards Mars. And so I was literally giving the players 5 seconds to actually make a decision again and again and again. And it was one of those times where they got in the ship, they were trying to get out of the asteroid, they managed to get to the ship after lots of this. And then I think it was Kyle was the pilot, couldn't get the ship started. Yeah. So he was failing roll after roll. And I said, okay, you're further into the atmosphere now. And literally, I think he had one more roll to get the ship out of the asteroid before it hit Mars. And I wasn't going to change shit. Like if they died, they died. So I think there's lots of good ways of creating tension. We talked about sound. Call of Cthulhu game that I ran with Bill and Stephanie I wanted to run them because I never played it. And I was thinking, fuck, you've never played Call of Cthulhu? Played this game. And so with candles, obviously. Then we had a humidifier for fog and make it a bit more damper. And then some sounds. And
these weren't just candles. Sorry to interrupt for a moment. These were like big red dripping candles.
Sweet.
That were like all around the room.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
But the sound that fucked them up, that scared the shit out of Bill and Stephanie, was the bed moving because a ghost was in there. It was a haunted thing. And I actually had that great sound from someone who put it onto SoundCloud for this particular thing. And I think Bill went green and Steph went white. And both of them said, I don't really want to do Call of Cthulhu with you ever again because they scared them shitless. So there's lots of ways. Sound is great. And then lighting as well. If you've got hue lights, you can change the lights as well and stuff like that. Mark, do you want to ask a question? We'll leave this as the last question because as I promised, I said, like, we'll just do our sessions and see how we do. And then we can think about questions after. But if there's one question you want to ask, Mark.
Sure. Sure. So we talked a little bit about how people who are prone to, people who have experience in playing video games, they often don't, they don't see a way out other than defeating the monster in front of them. They don't want to talk. And I've found, like all my friends that I've played with play lots of video games, they get into the min-maxing of things. They get into the kind of, here's the goblin, attack it, there's no other way around. How do you involve them a little bit more into the kind of world building and character mindset mentality? I like the game that Stephanie was talking about. I forgot the name, but essentially where your character dies and you lose memories. I can't believe I forgot it. We mentioned it multiple times. Anyway, I like that because you're forced to kind of think of your character dynamically as okay, this is like my character that previously knew this, now he doesn't or she doesn't, and where does that take this character? How do I convince everybody else that I'm actually becoming this character? And people that play a little bit more Skyrim-y is what we used to call it, like here's monster, attack it. How do you get them more involved in the character and world building of the game?
Great question.
Yeah,
Duane, you go.
Eric.
No, you go because I just spoke for a bit.
So we were mentioning Kyle there, and that's how Kyle grew up. He grew up on video games. So when you grow up that way, that's your frame of reference. Like, it was no fault of his that he hadn't played role-playing games before. It's just that was his only point of reference to playing role-playing games. So Mark, like you were saying, that he was just used to, you come up to a monster, you defeat it, and you move on, kind of thing. And I remember he was, sometimes he wouldn't be entirely comfortable. Eric, you might have remembered this as well, with with the role-playing aspect of it. And it took him a while to get into it, and he wanted to do it. So we started off doing stuff like eating everything in sight. But when we played our Star Wars game, there was one particular session where it focused just on his character, and his character was off on his own, doing some things. He was actually trying to get into that sandcrawler, and he didn't have the rest of the team to fall back on. So he was encountering these other characters, and he had to make his own decisions. He had to do his own talking. And, you know, he said that he found that a little bit uncomfortable, but he said that he found that to be a lot of fun, and it actually helped him play it out a little bit more. And I think he said that he started to get more comfortable after that happened. But it was helping him out at the same time, or trying to help him, like, you know, not demanding that he does any particular thing, just allowing him to sort of play it out, and you know, prodding a little bit and setting things up for him. But I think that he liked that aspect of it. And then since then, he seems to have gone into character a lot more easily than he did from what I remember at first. So that's an example that I remember. So it takes some time. But I think it's partly on the GM to sort of help that along in different ways too, just to create different circumstances and scenarios for that player to help develop in that way, away from just the simple like hack and slash sort of aspect of it.
I like that, the concept of separating them from the group. So spotlight's on them. They might be slightly uncomfortable, but at least they don't have the crutch of someone else bringing something up or saying.
That's right. Yeah. And they don't have someone else who, you're right, who can come in and save the day or do their talking for them or something like that. It's all on them to do it. And not in a bad way. Like it wasn't anything that was, you know, he was going to die. Well, I guess he could have, but I think that it did help him, and I think he had fun, which is the main thing of doing it, is having fun and doing it. So.
I think a lot of systems too add character flaws, and oftentimes those get overlooked.
Yeah.
I think leaning into those as a GM is important because it provides constraints.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think also playing other systems, because a goblin is a goblin until it isn't. So like Trugvarg Legends, goblins are they're miners. All they care about is mining, and they won't attack you unless you attack them, and that they can overload you. So like turning a goblin into actually the plot point for your story, this goblin knows where things are, and is maybe going to talk about it. And then as they're following the goblin, like Gollum, you build a character around the goblin. So they start to say, oh, wow, you could be my friend. And maybe the goblin even saves them at some point. I really like fucking with people's perceptions of what they think is reality and changing that reality. And so I think the discovery of the character, you've just got to give space for it to actually happen. The other thing which kind of leans into what Duane was saying is making sure that there is a plot point or set of plot points that are for one character only. And the character may have talked about them when they were creating their background, and they said, oh yeah, this, and the mother was this, and the father, oh, you have a sibling? Oh yeah, the sibling. Then you can intervene those people, because maybe your sister steps out, no, you can't kill the goblin. What? Where did you come from? He's my lover. What? Like really challenging the perceptions by using some of their background. But I definitely have seen it like whereby people have played different games and actually letting them experience one or two games rather than a whole campaign. And what that forces them to do is build lots of characters. And eventually, I would say they find their place of where they really enjoy, and then they evolve with their character then. So that's another way of doing it.
Yeah, I will agree that playing other games does help a lot, and with other game masters, because like I said, you could play a game with a certain game master and you can say, oh, that game is terrible, I hated that, but maybe it was just that particular way it was ran, or the other way around. You could have a really good game master who could make a really terrible game better. So it helps to mix those things up and to try different games and different game masters. You just get a different taste for how different things can go. So it makes it a lot more fun and interesting, and sort of like you said, Eric, it opens things up a bit more. You can see the other possibilities that are out there.
The other thing is, how do they play their computer games? So I love discovery. So one of the things I will always do is try and get rid of the, I'm missing the word now, but the cloud that you're trying to discover all the spaces and everything else.
The fog of war.
Fog of war, that's it. Thank you, Bill. Is seeing what they did in games or how they play games, if you play them with them, what were the things they were really after? Sometimes it is the grind, they want the treasure, that's a good hook. Sometimes it's like me, it's about discovery, which is why I like games like Numenera, because you've no fucking idea what that creature is all about. You don't know what powers, how is it going to use it on you? You've no idea. And that, I think, so for me, discovery is really important. Understanding the motivation of the player and why they play computer games, and then using that as a way of actually kind of like helping them kind of evolve. But playing characters takes people, I would say, years. It's not something I've seen just happen, like unless they're an actor or they've done improv or something else. So I guess be patient.
Took me a long time to play anything other than the stealthy rogue type in another system.
Yeah.
It's funny, a lot of us still have types that we play when we go back to certain games. I mean, I every time I play D&D, which isn't all that often, I'm often some kind of a rogue offshoot. It's very rare that I play something else. So yeah, we still do have our crutches no matter how long we've played, that's for sure. But it is fun to try out different characters too. Yeah.
Cool.
One
I think that's a good way
just
to...
as a... Oh, I was going to make a final note.
Concept.
Before we finish off. Connecting all of those points, I haven't played a ton of computer games or video games either, but one game that I have become obsessed with is Divinity 1 and 2. Love playing through them. And one thing that I really appreciate about Divinity is also that who you kill has consequences. So, if your team is really big into just, finding a monster and killing them, in the game, we're playing right now Divinity again with a friend who just loves to jump in and kill people. And so he jumped into the town, started a fight with one of the guards, and then all of the guards in the town basically descended on us and we had to restart because there's no way we were going to win that. So having, consequences for just jumping in and killing people was a really quick lesson of like, you have to think about it and figure out your surroundings and understand what's going on first, which means creating maybe a slightly different story to the classic dungeon crawl.
That person she's talking about, Mark, is Ash from our work.
Yes.
He likes to kill everything.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, to finish off today, everybody tell a character that is a crutch for you. Now, Bill, obviously you talked about like Rogue. Give us a little bit more information and we'll work across and then we'll finish off like that.
Yeah, for me, the Rogue is an easy pick. One, because they're usually stealthy, so I don't always have to have tactics in mind until the moment, because I can easily slip away. And I generally don't have to talk because I can be kind of that secretive type off in the corner, minding their own business, doesn't want anybody's attention. But that's a crutch for me because I think, so Steph and I did improv together. It's that jumping in, it's that jumping out on stage. It's difficult to get over that hump. And so I've been pushing myself to try other character types just so that I have to be involved in conversation more, but that's primarily the reason there.
Cool. Mark, how about you?
I haven't played too many, but what I've found, at least when I start playing a character, starting a character that has either like a strong religious affiliation or a strong kind of base like faction affiliation to give a foundation of what what like they should say in certain scenarios to jump into the role play is something that I found is a crutch of mine. Like recently when we were playing the Warhammer Fantasy, my character had a strong religious affiliation. It was easy to just hate something because it's what I'm supposed to hate, but then also see other people's reactions off of that. So stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool. Duane?
I think for me, it goes back to, especially the fantasy type games, is the roguish type of character or some kind of an offshoot of it. The last one that I played in Pathfinder was a swashbuckler, but so a bit of a left turn from the rogue, but still essentially a rogue at the same time. The one thing I'll mention is that most of my characters in games are the talkers. But part of that relates to how the rest of your group is, like how they play as player characters. I usually find that there's usually one or two people in a role-playing group that are comfortable with being the talkers most of the time or a lot of the time. So I don't mind doing that. So it often comes to me, and I don't mind playing that. So it's interesting. Sometimes it's defined by how everyone plays within the group, what type of character that you end up playing.
Cool. Stephanie?
For me, my go-to character is always going to be one with magic, and that's mostly because I grew up just in the Harry Potter fan world, so I always want to be Hermione or some variation of Professor McGonagall, because that just gets me so excited. But in terms of a crutch, I think one way that I build a character is I pick one personality trait of mine and then I exaggerate it and I build that into the character, and I sort of cycle through like 2 or 3 personality traits that I build in. And so I'm essentially playing an exaggerated version of myself, which makes it easier. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. For me, it was definitely Wood Elf Ranger is probably the thing I lean into. My crutch is probably sometimes my tactical and wargaming. So I tend to try now, I think I'm exploring archaeologists in different ways, or engineers, which unfortunately is too close to my life. But I try to find characters where I don't have to do so much talking and let other people do talking. Cool. Thank you for playing with us today. It'll be interesting to see what your feedback is of this stream after. And I'm talking to you guys because no one else is going to watch it, but that's okay. And what you'd like to talk about next. We do have a few more people that will join us at different times, but I would love to know, like, what would you like to explore? What questions? And we can probably use Discord. I'll set up a channel where we can start saying, which areas do you really want to explore? And then we can talk about that so that we're learning and sharing with each other. Cool.
That sounds great.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care, everyone.
See you, buddy. See you,
Bye.
everybody.
See you guys.
Bye. Great
Bye.
to see you too.